G'day YouTube. I thought I'd do a video on the starting system for your Evinrude Johnson motors that has forward controls. The system's pretty simple. I'll just flip the camera around. I feel like two strokes are misunderstood in terms of, people have trouble starting them and that sort of thing. And I think it's to do with the understanding of how the system works. The internals aside, the motor only really needs air, which it's basically always got, spark and fuel. The spark side of it, if you're having problems starting it, is always, it doesn't matter if it's a lawnmower or a boat or whatever, you pretty much just want to remove a spark plug and keep it plugged into the lead. Just lean the spark plug up against the body of the block and get somebody to crank the motor and just see if the spark plug is sparking. Because you've got it out of the motor, you'll be able to see the tip, and as long as it's sort of lightly pushed up against the block, you'll have an ability to see the spark happening or not. If you're cranking and the spark isn't happening, then on these sort of motors, you've got your ignition system, and the ignition system on these is it's quite hard to see on the camera, but essentially power comes in, and then when the engine is in the correct timing, it will give the spark to the spark plug. One of the cheapest fixes is to grab either the spark plugs like your used ones that you did from your last service. Try those, see if your spark plugs themselves are the problem. Quite often they're corroded, like this one here. You can see there is a build-up of corrosion on the spark plug itself right here, and sometimes that can contribute to not enough earth or not sparking at all, and then without spark the motor won't run. Fuel itself is another important thing with two strokes. So you'll coming through here, you'll have a fuel line, which in this case is wrapped in this convoluted tubing, and inside of the fuel line there, you want to check that's in good condition and not leaking and that sort of thing. The easiest check for if your motor's getting fuel is just to remove this cover, unplug the fuel line. It'll just be a hose clamp, usually the plier type or the screwdriver type. Undo the clamp and get somebody to pump the bulb. You should have a strong amount of fuel coming out of that fuel line, and then obviously when it's plugged in, the fuel line goes into the carbies, or could be going to a fuel pump if it's fuel injected. Not much difference between the carby and fuel injection, other than EFI is very easy to start, but with well-maintained carbies, they should be easy to start too. There's very little adjustable parts on these boat carbies, really. So yeah, I'll just go to the front of the boat now and show you a few things. So I've just split open the case of the controls here so we can see what's inside. So it's kind of important to understand this. Essentially, you've got your key that goes in here, and as you turn the key to different positions, it will provide power to each of these wires. With the starting circuit, if you're having problems with turning the key and the motor's not doing anything, you really need to focus on this wire here. That's the yellow with a white stripe. That's the cranking wire, and essentially once you get the key to this position, the on position, and you turn it like that, that excites that wire, so it provides power to that wire, which goes to the starter motor solenoid, which I'll show you at the back in a minute. Before it does that, it actually passes through a neutral safety switch. So when you crank that wire goes up, down, and through to this section here, and then passes out of this wire here and then goes into the loom that goes up to the motor. If for some reason your boat is not in neutral, so you've got it in a different position, this switch won't be on and it won't allow current to pass through. So obviously check that you're definitely in neutral, and if you're clever with a multimeter, you can check continuity between this section of the starter and the output side of the neutral safety switch. So if you set your multimeter to continuity, put one pole on here and one on this position here, and then hold it in that position, you should be able to hear a beep or see continuity on your multimeter. If you don't, then the neutral safety switch could be faulty. There isn't too much else to do with up this end of the boat. The only thing that might be worth pointing out is, so you've got this thing here, which you might be mistaken for thinking is a starter relay or something like that. That's actually a speaker, so that you've got signals that will be given to you depending on what could be the problem with your motor. So if I have a look up here at this, so essentially on this one, if you get a continuous sound, it could be overheating. You've got one short tone every 40 seconds, that's low oil. Rapid short tones is no oil. Continuous sound and engine operates at near maximum speed, could be fuel restriction. So you get a couple of clues there depending on what this horn signal is making, what sound. Actually, I will show something else. If your motor is cranking but is having a hard time starting, there's sort of two things that you need to remember about these old two-stroke setups. One is the amount of air that you're getting to the motor, and also whether or not the choke is on. So essentially when I start these, if it's cold, I will lift this lever up into the fully open position, and also just be aware that this key can push inwards as well, which is essentially a cold start or choke. So after you prime your fuel bulb, you'll lift this up to maximum position and turn that to on, and as you start it, make sure you're pushing it in and then turning it. That will allow more fuel to go in on initial start, which the two strokes, if they've been sitting for quite a while, you'll need to make sure the fuel is primed, and also that the choke, it's getting a starting amount of fuel, which is extra fuel. And you do that by pushing that in and then turning. Pushing that in essentially activates, I don't know if I can get a good view of it, but down here in front of the carby, there's essentially an electronic valve that will give extra fuel if you push that key in upon initial start. So let's say you've got fuel, you know that you've got fuel coming through your fuel line. Let's say the spark is happening as well when you crank it. The next step is whether or not the motor is actually cranking. So this is your starter motor here. That's on the left-hand side of the motor. And I guess the anatomy of it is essentially down at the bottom here. You've got your positive. So there's two fat wires, which is this one here. There's two fat wires, a positive and a negative, that come directly from your battery through to here. Your positive is going onto this side of the solenoid, and your negative is going straight onto the body of the starter here. And it's got power, assuming your isolator's on, your motor will have power all the time. It's already run to here. All your starter motor really is waiting for is a signal from that yellow and red wire. That wire that I showed you at the front that comes off the key is only excited when it's in the cranking position, and it comes all the way through this loom, and for a start it pops out on this joiner, And so you'll want to separate that and clean, get some contact cleaner, clean in there and clean this side. Quite often this side might have corrosion. And after that, the wires go up into this loom and come down to the starter solenoid. Very hard to see, but down there is the yellow with a red stripe, and it goes onto the bottom of this solenoid. So underneath the solenoid there is a pole, and it's just got one bolt hanging out of it, and that wire is screwed into it. When the solenoid receives a positive voltage coming into this solenoid here, basically it allows power to pass from this side, and it will allow the starter motor to start cranking. So if you turn the key and you're not getting cranking, it's basically one of two things. Your earth, which is your other major fat wire here, you'll need to unbolt that and really clean it like I have here. I suspect this is what's starting this motor from going. And then you'll also want to undo your positive pole and clean that up, make sure that that's receiving maximum amps for the starter motor. And then you want to check these joins. That yellow excite wire, if that's getting to here and not doing anything, then the solenoid could be faulty. So essentially what you can do is you can stick your multimeter into your yellow with red stripe on this connector and get somebody to crank the boat, and you should see voltage on that wire. If that voltage is coming through to here, going into the solenoid, but then not cranking the starter motor, then the solenoid is at fault. The good news is you don't need to use this solenoid that's bolted on the bottom. As you can see, the case of the boat really makes it a problem, especially for checking that bottom wire, because it's up under there. That's a big deal, having to take things apart to get to that wire. You essentially have to trust that wire on the bottom is good. You can stick your hand under and feel it, make sure the wire, the bolts, the nut is still holding that wire onto the bottom of the solenoid, but that's all you can really check. But if you know you're getting power to here, then yeah, your solenoid is not sending full voltage through to the starter to actually start it. There is another thing to check. There is one wire that goes from the key back to here, and that's this wire here. It essentially, there's a bunch of earths, so there's that one there, as well as this one here. There's just two earths for various systems. One's for the ignition, and one is for the key. If you are finding that this is dirty or corroded, you want to take that bolt out like I have and polish up all of the terminals for that. If the key or the starter solenoid doesn't receive good earth, then you can't expect it to work properly. It won't perform its function. So essentially the earths need to be checked as well. This is the other fat wire that goes onto the starter motor. It's positioned here normally. So you'll want to check that the body behind it. Sometimes what I had to do is take some of this coating off, because the paint that they'd painted on here, it was half covering the earth wire. So that's a little bit of a problem. And also you want to polish off the terminals on these sides as well to make sure they're clean and dry and not corroded. I won't go into this too much, but if you're having problems with your tilt trim, either here or on your control handle, this is the location of the solenoids. Let's say it's going up or not down and that sort of thing. You can switch them to troubleshoot. They're good to replace, I don't know, once a year, depending on how much you boat. Yeah, I won't go into it too much, but if you click on my channel and then click on videos, I've done a whole video on testing and troubleshooting your trim, so check that out. It is worth keeping in mind, it's not very often you get wires that rub together and cause a short. It can occur, for example, over here, if you can see that aluminium rod holders there, when they got installed, I was very cautious of not drilling or sawing or melting any of the wiring that goes directly underneath it. It can happen, but normally you're going to find most of the issues, if you to do with starting, in particular the starter motor and the starting circuit, it's going to be with corrosion, which you can see I've polished up all these terminals, and yeah, I'll give this one a go in a minute, see how she goes. I guess I didn't say it, and it probably doesn't go without saying, but you need to check fuses as well. You might have one up under your dash, and you will have one in your motor as well. They usually, you know, for these old motors, there'll be a little glass fuse, could be a plastic wedge fuse, whatever. Just periodically check those as well. Always keep a spare, especially for your starter. And it's worth saying, always keep a pair of long nose pliers on board in case you pop a fuse while you're out and about, because trying to fish that fuse out of there is a mission without them. Yeah, obviously keep a little toolkit with you. That'll get you out of trouble if you're stuck out on the water. So I'm just going to prime up this fuel line. I like to squeeze the bulb and then wait a few seconds. Then wait a few seconds. Do that until the bulb's like getting to be a bit hard to push. My batteries. So this is one side of the fat wire that goes into your motor, and the other one comes off my isolator, which is up under here. So I've deliberately left the controls not bolted up so I can troubleshoot if the key wiring or anything's the problem, but after just polishing up the battery terminals and that side of thing, I'm pretty confident it'll be something related to that. So yeah, I'm just going to give it heaps of open throttle and push this in and turn. Oh, I've still got my isolator on, of course. Alright, so got the isolator turned on now. Let's try that again. Fingers crossed you get a motor that starts. I'm just going to turn that off for a sec. I just want to give it a few cold starts, just to make sure I've ironed out whatever the problem was. Seems to have quite a strong start. It's before it was not wanting to start. It wasn't even cranking at all. It was just nothing when you turn the key. So anyway, I guess I wanted to show you this because it might trigger something if your boat's not starting. It might give you, it's not really an instructional, you know, like how to fix it, but it might trigger some thought into You know, it could be corrosion in this box, or, you know, with your key, your ignition and that. Could be your wiring, could be a fuel line if you're not getting fuel to the boat. Could be a spark problem, but quite often corrosion plays a big role in if your boat was running and then you've left it for a season and then now it's not. Quite often it's just corrosion somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, hopefully this was helpful to you, and yeah, thanks for watching.